So we are now live on,
Live.
Are we expecting any absences for tonight's meeting?
I didn't get any emails from anybody.
We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order since it's 7 o'clock. The meeting will uphold as much as possible that we do at in-person meetings in chambers. However, note that all votes will be held by roll call. And I ask you to raise your hand up in the air so that I can see it on the screen. Or Susan is going to use the chat feature to raise her hand so that I can call on you and we're not talking over each other during the meeting. For those in the public that have joined us, we will have 2 public hearings, and I believe staff has, or they will be reaching out to you in the chat feature to figure out which public hearing of interest it was that you wanted to speak on, and we'll provide more prior to that when that agenda item comes up as to how you'll jump on and be able to voice your opinion. Karen, can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Young,
Here.
Commissioner Keen, Commissioner Brink,
Here. I don't know if that was.
Commissioner Miller,
Here.
Commissioner Batty,
Here.
Chair Langness.
Present. We have a quorum. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance, and we ask those that are able to join us in our nation's pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which
it
it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
Under God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and
liberty and
justice
justice
for all.
for all.
Next, we have approving the agenda, and I will note that staff did request that we add an item on the agenda between 9 and 10 regarding the rooster nuisance memo for discussion. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second? We have a motion by Commissioner Batty and a second by Commissioner Miller. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. Karen, can you take a roll call vote?
Commissioner Young,
Aye.
Commissioner Keen. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Brink,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Commissioner Batty,
Aye.
Chair Langness.
Aye. Agenda is approved. Item number 5, approve Planning Commission meeting minutes from April 8th, 2020. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Commissioner Miller moves to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Batty seconds. Is there any discussion or corrections necessary for the meeting minutes of April 8th, 2020? Seeing none, Karen, can you take a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Young,
Aye.
Commissioner Brink,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Commissioner Batty,
Aye.
Commissioner Chair Langness. Sorry.
Aye. Motion carries. Next on the agenda is a variance application for the address 21551 Inwood Avenue for a front yard setback. This does include a public hearing to consider the variance application. The process for this will be that Donovan will present the staff report, and then we will give the applicant, if they are available online, an opportunity to talk. After each of those points, commissioners will be able to answer questions, and then we'll open up the public hearing. Just prior to opening up the public hearing, Dan Undum, one of our staff, will give instructions on how we will call those members of the public up before we bring it back to the commission. Donovan, you want to kick it off?
Certainly.
Thank you.
I would like to present first of all, I'd like to thank the applicants for their patience. They had applied for this back in February with a complete application in early March, and they've been waiting until we figured out how to do these public hearings online. So I want to note that, and also ask their patience as we move forward with this, as the technology is still evolving. But with that said, I'd like to present the variance application for 21551 Inwood Avenue. This is to construct a garage 4 feet from the property line at its narrowest distance. The property here is on Third Lake. It's single family zoning with the shoreline overlay. And what's unique about this property are two things, and I'll spend a little time here on this aerial map to show you. This is the subject property here. There's actually an upper house and a lower house with a steep slope in between, leading down to the lake. For this property, there was a, well, I believe probably the platting of the road area became first, and the road was constructed second, 216th Street here, turning to Inwood Avenue at this juncture. But you can see from the solid lines that the road doesn't follow the platted right of way. And so that essentially that leaves a lot of obstructions within the official right of way. And at some point I expect this to be cleaned up, but when looking at this application, we have to take the facts as they stand currently to show how this is currently the front property line for the applicant's property, and that it would be likely, if this is ever changed, that this solid line, the property line, would go southward and be closer in alignment to the curb, which is seen here. There's this white line here. So that's something of a unique facet of this, but you can see also from the aerial how many of these other garages along here are situated basically on the property line. Now moving to the application, the property is located here. What's being proposed is let me get to the existing here a little more. As you can see here from the submitted existing condition survey, here's the lower house and the upper house, and the current driveway area. This doesn't show, but there's actually a shed located here along this western property line. There's a non-conforming shed by its close nearness to the property line here that's existing. These two structures are non-conforming by both their not meeting the minimum dwelling size, as well as being too close to that eastern property line, as well as there only being one dwelling allowed on a single lot. What is proposed is a large addition to the lower house. So you can see with this attached garage. So you can see here's the lower house still existing. Non-conformity rules allow it to remain, in this close. Its closest point 5.2 feet from the property line, but there's no expansion there. However, the expansion of the house addition meets the side setbacks. It's where the garage is currently proposed. It's at 4 feet from that southwestern corner from the existing property line. And as you can see, that's about some, I would say about, I think I measured 20 some feet to the curb line currently. So the 4-foot variance request does sound extreme, but given the context, you can expect that, the actual use right away, there's still quite a different distance. And also with this, they propose to remove this section of the driveway, but keep the other portion of the driveway there, and then of course provide the driveway access to the proposed garage. This proposed construction still is within the maximum impervious surface percentage, and so they only ask for one variance there. That's for that front structure setback. There are trees on the site. They're proposed to be removed, and that tree preservation rules require replacement of those trees that aren't exhibiting signs of disease or death. Because of the steep slope on the property shown here with these contour lines, how close they are, and the city engineer estimated, up to 40% slope, a little over 40% slope at some places there. Drainage on the property is a concern, as well as just stability of that hillside. And so actually I see a 62% listed as part of that slope. So the engineer's comments do seek to address that, ensuring that any sort of construction doesn't result in erosion or destabilization of the slope. And also the city engineer makes a note about the tree removal. I did receive one comment from a neighbor for this, and it was from Natalie Fitzpatrick, who I believe works at Brock, which is the aggregate, former gravel pit adjacent to this property. And she expresses concerns, and this was was included in your PC packet, staff packet. And there's a concern related to the snow removal. Also, that a concern that perhaps the property lines are correct, and then also just some confusion around the Doug McNerlin listed as an applicant, but he is applicant with Maria Kaiser, the owner, and some concerns about the process. And so I wrote her back and discussed that the certificate of survey is considered to be accurate, and prescriptive easement actually has the road much over some of the Brock property, and that snow storage is something we encourage snow storage to be on on the person's property where it's been removed, but the city code does not address that. Private issue, but we always encourage people to deal with their snow responsibly and not push it across the road. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions from the Planning Commission.
So,
Chair Lang, can you see the screen?
Yes, I'm sorry. I had my mute thing on. I kept saying Commissioner Miller. Commissioner Miller, sorry. I'll get you Batty in a second.
I'm pretty good at reading lips, but I wasn't sure. Donovan, my question is on your front setback, the 30 foot. Is that from the curb or from the center of the street?
That appears to be from the center of the street.
And is it supposed to be from the curve or the curb?
No, there's always the city asphalt is always narrower than the right of way. So there's room for snow storage. Sometimes there's utility easements in there or utilities placed in there. Commonly for almost every block is different in the older parts of the city, but commonly, it appears about, anywhere from 5 to 12 feet distance between the curb and the edge of the public right of way.
Thank you.
Commissioner Batty?
so this is actually a garage with a house attached, right?
Says the architect, yes.
So, I mean, it's fine. I mean, there's I don't have any problem with the setback, and I'm not sure how these, if there's some kind of a procedure here. Obviously that road is not that old through there. And it'd be an interesting story to find out how it got placed so far off the right of way. But that's not our problem here tonight, or it's not our issue here tonight. In looking at that, there's no other, I mean, I'm assuming because they're not asking for a variance that site coverage, you stated that all the other setbacks are okay, but things like percentage of site coverage, I'm assuming because that existing house is a certain distance from the lake that we're okay with that. But I was just curious on the site cover, if the site coverage thing met the current zoning regs.
Yes, certainly. It's listed on the survey as 29.8%. So they're right underneath that 30% maximum
Okay.
as a proposed condition.
Commissioner Young?
Yeah, I have an issue. I don't think it's going to be the 29 point whatever, because they're looking at the drawings. It would appear that they are not going to have their driveway extend across the full front of the garage. And my guess is that most folks like to have their driveway extend across the full front of the garage, and not leave an area that is not gravelled or otherwise impervious right in front of their garage door. So I have some concerns about whether or not they'll make their 30%. The second thing is, and you've heard me ask this one before, there is no place to put snow on either side of that garage. It's going to be very, very challenging not to put snow either on their west neighbor or their east neighbor or their across the road neighbor. And so I do have that concern. I'm not sure if they wouldn't be better off either making the garage a little less long, and the proposed house that is the addition to the garage to be a little less long, to both help them with their impervious surface and with their issue on the variance.
Commissioner Young, if I could address a couple of your concerns there. On that western side where there's not the strong gray color of the existing driveway, within the proposed condition survey, there's a hatched area that is in the legend says it's proposed bituminous. So they do propose a driveway the full width of the garage opening, or at least the garage structure, I should say. Also, and this is more difficult, I mean, if you could look at, assuming that you have documents before you for your visual cues. On that east side, there is a whole section that's also probably close to 20 feet wide that is existing driveway to be removed. So that would be available for snow storage. And of course, not have to, no snow be needing to be removed from the area as well. And I see a full 10 feet of width that's within the right of way, but on the west side there does seem like there's room, and this is kind of something of a probably about a 23 feet length of driveway. And so it's
That kind of looks like where they've been storing their boat trailer and their dock during the winter. Looking on the aerial, there was the boat trailer. And looking at the photographs, it appears that the dock was sitting there. Or is that dock on the lakeside?
I believe the dock, well, I'm looking, there's docks in the lakeside.
Okay. But you're confident that they can get to the 30% 30% pervious, a maximum of 30% impervious, correct?
Yes, I take when a surveyor signs their certificate of survey, I take that as they're putting their license on the line, and that those calculations are correct.
Commissioner Batty, I think I saw your hand go up next.
I'm, yeah. I was kind of wondering what Susan was looking at there, because it looks to me like they're talking about a certain portion of driveway that I'm looking at the sheet that's titled, it says draft, it's the one that shows the new house on it. But it's really unclear there what they're actually, there's a note on there where it says existing driveway to be removed. And it's the area inside their property line to the east, but why didn't they show a line there where they were going to end I'm assuming that they're going to take out asphalt all the way to the street, aren't they?
Doesn't show that.
I would not assume that. Yeah, no, it's not shown, and there's no requirement that they remove that, and that's actually not part of their impervious surface calculation at this time.
This, again, I'm with Susan here. I look at this, I've looked at a few drawings down through the years, and it just looks large compared to the site.
Yes. Well, and Donovan, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm sort of continuing on. The proposed house, the proposed garage are more impervious surface than the existing house that doesn't have a garage. And so I'm wondering how they get a decrease. And I'll leave it to someone who's wiser than I am.
Well, I like to also, they submitted photos. I like to, show those to, and they also show, the area, the neighborhood in winter condition. And so you can see, now this is actually, looking eastward, so you can see, sorry, Susan. you can see, snow piled up. The property to the east, where the snow is as tall as looks like a 4-foot picket fence, a much wider area, and there is room there to remove the snow. Now, if we look westward, and the subject property here, looks like a kind of station wagon truck or truck parked in the parking lot. You can see my cursor moving there. That's a subject property, and you can see snow beyond that also piled up. And so looks like, pretty much could be like midwinter conditions. So, it does reduce some of the mystery or uncertainty around, I think, some of the snow storage. And looking at going back to, and this is, other drawing. Here's from the lakeside, the existing, lower house to remain. Again, another photo of the lower house with the upper house in view. And there's just the existing upper house. And then the existing survey shows, some portion, of the existing driveway already out there. And here's here's the house footprint. There's the other house footprint. A shed.
What?
Sorry?
What is the house footprint? What are you pointing to?
Okay, that lower one there, it's kind of the shaded area. In these houses, they're around 607 square feet.
But what is the outline that looks like another footprint of a house on this drawing? What are those? Is that some kind of a setback line there, or what is that kind of fat boomerang shaped piece of or lines there? That line and just follow
that
line
was.
down. What is that?
That's a little bit. It's kind of. I know it's kind of muddying the image, but it's the footprint of a proposed structure, but it's not what they are proposing. So
Okay, so that's something different. It's just something different.
correct. We can.
That was really confusing.
Yeah. It's but the structure itself is. It's not going to work. The structure itself is something. Right here.
Yeah, I can see the existing house there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah. If you could, yeah, I know. So my point is that there is about, I think they state is about 23.1% current impervious. So there is a decent amount, and they're proposing to increase it to 29.8.
Commissioner Miller, I saw your hand up as well.
Donovan, if you could put that last survey back up.
Sure.
I think you alluded to this, but I wanted to just make sure that I was correct in what I heard. The impervious that we're talking about is only within these black survey lines, and they're not taking into account what's actually there, which goes out to the actual street.
Correct.
And so if they change the streets and put the lines properly where they're supposed to be, you're going to be way over the impervious.
That would be the case unless they put in impervious pavers, made some accommodation.
And so that, what is it, approximately 20 feet from the black line to the curb line that we're talking about, times the width of that lot?
Approximately, it would only, there still would be some distance between the curb and the adjusted lot line.
Right?
And this, of course, this is, you know, also this is subject to, there is a utility, you know, wire that runs through here as well, which could impact where that line goes. But you know, where the public right of way would be. But yeah, I mean, I estimate it could move forward about 10 feet, you know, southward.
So that's going to put them over quite a bit then.
Well, that would be a matter where they would then have to perhaps remove more, you know, remove a you know, equal amount from that, you know, wide area, you know, that is not part of the garage approach. You know, but that would be, that's really speculative at this point.
So it's not going to get changed probably in the near future. So we're going to go ahead and potentially approve this variance, but yet then in the future, let's say 2, 3, 4 years down the road, they're going to come in and move those boundaries. They're going to pull that survey line out to the curb where it should be, and they're going to be over their impervious by a lot. And we're going to call them up and tell them they have to remove their driveway.
It would, I mean, that is a very uncertain timing on when that might happen. And, you know, that would be me or my successor having those conversations that they need to make some choices. You know, I don't think that's something we can plan for at the moment. I mean, I understand the concern, but it's, you know, to actually move that line according to what, you know, current city practice, it's all resident driven and paid for. And to actually have consensus for every one of those neighbors to agree to that, that takes a lot. And that's why it hasn't been done. And I believe the situation's been like this for probably decades. I mean, maybe Doug McNerlin, the applicant, can provide some narrative on that one. But, you know, I bring that up because it, you know, it potentially could be a future change, which would make the apparent, I mean, basically would make the variance something different as far as distance from the right of way, but definitely not conforming in the future.
So yeah, that's my question. I'm not trying to be a real stickler on this, but who owns? I mean, honestly, they're using property right now, basically that they don't own. Is that kind of what's happening?
Certainly. I mean, and that's part of. It's in the right of way. It's used for vehicle storage, like any kind of parking on a city street would be. You know, and everyone who has a driveway that meets a road, you know, it's a similar situation. It's just a little more exaggerated in this case.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Commissioner Young, I saw your hand raised.
Donovan, did you say that there are 2 non-conforming sheds on the property, and will both of them be removed?
Yes.
I don't see other hands. I have a couple of questions to Donovan. While you have the map up here, can you zoom into the existing driveway to be removed? Is it only the portion that is actually on their property and not in the right of way that they're proposing to remove? Or is that other line coming off the end of the driveway towards the street, the new driveway? I'm having a hard time understanding what the new driveway will eventually look like.
Sure. What you can see a dashed line here along the is an extension of the eastern proposed garage wall. And so what they've shown here is a removal of all this driveway not leading directly to the garage within their property boundary.
So the portion in the right of way would stay?
That's what they're proposing, yes.
If we were to refresh my memory on our driveway ordinance, if I recall correctly, you have to stay within 5 feet of the neighboring property. And I believe there's a maximum width. Are they exceeding either of those in this proposed driveway modification?
No, they're not seeing those because it's a 30-foot maximum width at the curb, basically at the public right of way. And what we have here is proposed is 22 feet wide. It's a 5-foot setback from the side property lines, which here it's 10. And over here, it's something in the range of, say, about 16, 17, I guess. You know, the way the zoning code's written, it doesn't, you know, it's silent on, you know, how any kind of driveway or paved area is treated within the public right of way. So that's why it's not added to the impervious surface. You know, when we wrote the driveway right of way ordinance a couple years ago, we allowed really only 2 encroachments within the public right of way. Well, 3 driveways, culverts, and mailboxes. And this is a driveway within the public right of way.
Okay, thank you. Were there other questions of staff? Commissioner Batty?
You know, this really though steps outside of certainly the intent. You know, the idea of this driveway width was that would extend basically to the street, except where it's flared out, you know, where you'd have an apron at the street a little bit. I don't think it was ever the intent to allow the kind of thing that they're gonna end up with here. That's way more than 30 feet wide. But it's, you know, it's all paved along, it's almost all completely paved along there anyway. So it's not anything that I'm gonna raise a stink about, but this certainly doesn't meet the intent of the ordinance as it relates to driveway width.
Were there other questions of staff? Otherwise, we'll bring the applicant in. Commissioner Young, I see your hand raised.
Yes. Just one thing for the consideration of the Planning Commission. We're encouraged to allow variances under the ABCD&E. I just wanted to bring to the attention of the rest of the planning commissioners, number C, that the plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner. And in this situation, the landowner has complete and total control of the size of the house that they're building and the size of the garage that they're building, and could easily get away from the variance request and deal with the potential for exceeding impervious surface if they changed the size of their build.
All right, I didn't hear a question in there. Are there any other questions of staff? All right, Dan Undum, could you please bring on the applicant to see if they have anything to add or any type of presentation for us? And then we'll open it up for commissioners to questions to them as well.
Well, and just 1 second, as long as I have the opportunity, if you are as an attendee right now, if you look at the middle of your screen, you should have the option to raise your hand. When it comes time for the public forum, I ask when your item comes up that you wish to make public comment on, is to raise your hand. I will then promote you in as a panelist. You'll be able to give your public comment. Once you're done with your comment, I will move you back into the attendee. So that'll be the process. Just make sure you find that raise your hand features in the middle of your screen as you scroll down. Right now, I will promote Doug in, the applicant, to a panelist.
Hey, Doug, welcome. Go ahead anytime. It appears you're muted,
He's
Doug.
muted.
You may have to, in the lower left corner of your screen, click the unmute.
Okay, how about now?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Right, so there we are. Thanks for your time on this. It's kind of been interesting listening to you guys. So, couple of points based on your questions. The snow the snow really isn't an issue. We've been shoveling this for, well, the 10 years that I've been involved with it. I'm along with my wife, Maria, who's the homeowner. That's why my name is on the application as well. We shovel it to the sides. It's there's plenty of room, and there isn't a problem with the snow storage. The trailer that you see on that one picture is from an old boat we had, and it was only there during the summer. We stored at Country View Marine in the wintertime. Now we have a pontoon that we store there as well. So that's out of the picture. The dock is on the lakeside. We just pull it out of the water. And then the driveway issue. The reason that it's only removed in that section where it shows it's removed is because that was part of our calculations when we're trying to get down to be under the 30% requirement. That driveway was existing, and we had just had it refurbished and redone within the last 4 years. So that's why it's there. It was there already, and we just had it redone because it was just in rough shape. We didn't see any reason to remove it because we weren't concerned about it. And again, it didn't affect the pervious versus impervious and seemed to meet all the requirements. That's the only reason that driveway was there. We're not that concerned about that part of the driveway. The driveway we need is just going to be the 2 spots that are in front of the garage. I mean, we planned on leaving it there just because there was no reason to remove it. Other than that, I think somebody asked about how long the road situation has been there. I'm sure it's been 30 to 35 years, based on comments with my wife, who's lived up there for a long time, and the neighbors as well. So the road situation just has been there a long time. And when everybody has done or redone the work, you can see when you look at the pictures, the garages are all out to where they are at, and our garage is basically going to be equal to the same distance as everybody else's garage, and it'll just basically be on line with it. And then I know the house does look big, but it's not that big. It's a 2-car attached garage, and then there's a third stall kind of behind that's in the house. But then I think it's only like 921 finished on the main level. And then the second level would be over the garage. So that's closer to 1,100. It's a 3-bedroom house with a main level that just has the entryway, the foyer, a living room, the kitchen, and the dining room. And again, all of these plans were done as we went through the process of finding the variances during the surveys. We've had, I think, 6 or 7 different copies of the survey, just so that we could try and get something that we would like that would fit in and meet the requirements, with the only difference being where the garage is. And that's why we're asking for the variance, because we'd like it just to align with the rest of the neighborhood and just kind of stay in conformity with that.
All right, thank you. Were there questions of the applicant from commissioners? I am not seeing any.
I have no questions. I stopped by earlier this week and talked to the owners and got all my questions asked.
Thank you. Were there any other questions of the applicants? Seeing none. All right, hang on, Doug. We might have something pop up later on when we get back into the discussion, but we're gonna move into the public hearing portion. Dan, did you want to outline how this process is going to go, or kind of go over the list of those in order that we can call up?
Yep. At this point, I don't have anybody who's responded via chat that they're speaking to this particular item. If anybody who is in as an attendee right now wishes to speak to this, I just ask that you raise your hand and I'll get you moved in so you can make your comment.
I'll give it about 30 seconds here. If I don't see anything, we will just open and close the public hearing and go back to commissioner discussion on a potential motion. You're not seeing any either, correct, Dan?
I am not.
All right, we will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Commissioners, is there a motion or further discussion on this agenda item? Commissioner Miller? Commissioner Miller, you're on mute.
I'm following your footsteps, Eric.
That's okay.
I would just like to thank Doug and Maria for their work and their effort in bringing this forward. I think it'll be a nice improvement to their home, and just wanted to thank them.
Thank you, Kevin.
Commissioner Young?
Donovan, is there a reason that removal of the two non-conforming sheds is not part of the conditions?
Not part of the what? I'm sorry. What was the last thing?
The conditions?
Because it appears that there wouldn't be any room. It's just to me that it's stated that they will, within the proposed impervious calculations, it does say, I'm sorry. It does existing second house. I'm mistaken. No, the existing second shed is saying is proposed to be included. But the one up by the road that was seen in the photos, it appears there wouldn't be even room for that one, and it's not shown in the proposed.
But both sheds are non-conforming, correct?
That is correct.
So do we typically try and get a property as close to conforming as possible when we're doing variances?
We do if it's related to the application.
Is there other commissioners that had discussion or a motion?
Chair Langness, I want to just mention one thing if I could.
Sure.
I didn't state my recommendation, which is staff recommends Planning Commission approval of the variance request to locate an attached garage 4 feet from the front lot line, the property located at 21551 Inwood Avenue with the following conditions. No construction or demolition shall occur prior to the issuance of this required city permitting. The lower cabin and new construction must be joined by a single to be a single structure with an enclosed conditioned passageway. All concerns of the city engineer must be met prior to the initiation of construction activities. All required Comfort Lake, Forest Lake Watershed District permits must be obtained, and no erosion or drainage issue shall result from the construction of the home.
I believe that was in the staff report.
Yes.
Were there, Commissioner Keen?
Yes, when I spoke with the homeowner the other day, the shed that's on the upper level, that was going to be moved out towards the street just for storage while they're doing the remodeling, and then it was going to be removed. Is that correct, Doug?
Yes, that's correct. We have, we're going to just move it over so it's out of the way of construction, but then it's going to house the well and whatever else we need while the house is being done, because the lower cabin runs off the same well. And then
electricity.
Yeah, and then we're going to get rid of it at that point once the house is complete, and or once we can get all the services within the new structure. And then the lower shed is it's basically a small Rubbermaid put together shed that we got from Menards that's just sitting on a wood platform that we built. And if we have to get rid of it, we will. Otherwise, I think the only issue with it was too close to the property line, and we could just move it. It's easily picked up and moved.
Was there other discussion, or does any commissioner have a motion? Commissioner Miller?
I would make a motion to approve the variance request for 21551 Inwood Avenue North with the 5 staff recommendations.
There's been a motion. Is there a second? Commissioner Keen, was that you indicating a second?
I'll second. I was on mute.
That's fine. There's been a motion and a second. Is there discussion? The one comment I have is I guess I would prefer that the driveway have greater conformity intent within the right of way to meet the impervious surface. And I think if we're giving a variance here to move into the right of way or closer to the right of way for the structure, the intent would be that that piece kind of be counted in there. And so I'm not gonna, not support this because of that, but I guess I would prefer that that be part of the conditions. Is there any other discussion on this item? Not seeing any. We'll move to a vote. Karen, can you have a roll call?
Commissioner Young,
No.
Commissioner Keen,
Yes.
Commissioner Brink,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Batty,
Yes.
Chair Langness.
Aye. Motion carries. McNerlins, I wish you the best of luck on your home. The pieces that I think Susan and I mentioned of concern, it probably doesn't mean you can't take those into consideration as you move forward as well. But I wish you the best of luck in building your new lake dream home.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. We certainly appreciate it.
Dan, can you pull them off of being online here with us as we move to the next item? The next item on the agenda is a grading permit application for 4470 Everton Avenue. This does include a public hearing as grading permit applications do. The first step will be that we will go through the staff report. Donovan will present that. We will then have commissioner questions. We will bring the applicant on if they are available and questions from commissioners to them. And then we will open up the public hearing for anyone that wishes to speak. We will again go through the process of that and the order at that time. So Donovan, do you want to kick us off? Donovan, you're on mute.
Thank you. I would like, Chair and members of the Planning Commission, I'd like to present the grading permit application review for the Minnesota Lakes Self-Storage Project. I'd like to clarify that this is simply the grading permit application. And what we have before you is simply no site improvements, no utilities installed, but the ability to shape the land to prepare it for future development, which includes tree removal and of course proper sediment erosion control installed. The property itself is located on the west side of I-35. It's currently vacant. It's about 15 acres. Much of the property is wetlands. The quick look at the wetland inventory shows this portion here, much of the property in yellow. And this is located just south of the Gateway Green subdivision, north of the MnDOT yard. Here's the interstate rest area. And so what the owner and developer, Dick Biagini, has to work with is an area that's little bit sloped, wooded, and just it's the high ground here. I also mentioned that Jerry Anderson, the architect, is representing the project tonight. And so they seek to come off Everton to conduct their grading activities, and the grading plan itself shows the creation of stormwater ponds to treat stormwater before it enters the wetland area. Here shown are a number of self-storage units. This is not the subject of our discussion this evening, but this is here to show you what the outlines of the stormwater pond and elevations which they'll be grading to. This grading permit is similar to one we had Piper's Preserve application on near the intersection of Imperial and Highway 97. So this is a similar process, which according to the zoning code follows the conditional use permit process, so that we do have a public hearing for this. We do there was public notification of neighbors within 350 feet and notice in the Forest Lake Times. And basically what they like to do is move the dirt. This is not a normal sequence, because oftentimes that this is just tied into part of the all of the project. So there's a continuous activity on the site. However, the applicant has filed for the conditional use permit to locate self-storage facility on this property, the plan unit development to have more than one structure on the property, as well as with the recent adoption of the 2040 plan, there's a comp plan amendment required. All along here, there were commercial properties that, after consideration and of the market, their location, it appeared that none of these properties were going to be developed as commercial properties. It's currently zoned highway business. But with the new 2040 comp plan, this shifted to high density residential. If you recall, there was a comp plan amendment, zoning map amendment for the Timber Ridge project. That was because that one did shift over to, was changed to a high density residential. And there's another parcel too, also just west of Custom Mold Design, that was changed from the highway business future land use to high density residential. So those three big applications, the conditional use permit, the planned unit development, and the comp plan amendment will be on the May 27th Plan Commission agenda. And so the applicant owner is working toward that full project approval. But at this point, we are just working with the grading permit. We did receive a public comment.
Hey, Donovan, can we
Yeah.
hold the public comment and we'll read those two just prior to the public hearing?
Certainly.
I think that's most appropriate.
Okay. So I'll just finish up here with there is part of the zoning code provisions for grading permits does have the Washington Conservation District review the application, so they have and provide comments. Also, since with the proximity to the wetlands and dealing with stormwater management facilities, there has been actually several permits with the Rice Creek Watershed District. One of them does relate to wetland delineation, then wetland replacement for the, for the proposed self-storage facility. And currently there is a CAPROC, which is the conditional approval pending receipt of changes permit. Well, it's the kind of a half permit that's been issued for the project. They have not received their full Rice Creek Watershed District permit. Also, Everton Avenue at this section is a county road. And so we've been in discussion with the county on what they require, because some work will be within the county right of way. And the staff recommendation is for approval with conditions related to the Rice Creek Watershed District permit being issued, Washington County's concerns or permits, addressed or permits obtained, an improvement agreement prepared by the city attorney, executed along with a letter of credit submitted, and grading permit expiration date 1 year from Planning Commission approval. With that, I'm happy to take any questions from the Planning Commission.
Further questions from commissioners? Commissioner Young, I believe you just raised your hand.
Yep. Donovan, are they going to be required to replace the trees?
No.
Okay. Don't we typically require that, especially when there are some, I did drive by the site yesterday, when there are high quality trees on the property?
With looking at there's a much higher threshold for tree removal within commercial areas, as well as the fact that the property, development, all that will be with basically all the trees will be all the land. There's no real buffer around, meaning that all the tree will be within 30 feet of the foundation of a structure, and that's generally what we allow for carving out of development. On the west side, and this is kind of getting ahead of us, but on the west side, the site plan is proposing, leaving a buffer of trees to, for screening, for buffering with the residential neighbors on the west.
Okay. And when I drove by yesterday, there was no sign there that said that there was going to be a neighborhood meeting. And I believe that that is a requirement, that if there's going to be a neighborhood meeting, that there be a sign to that effect on the property.
I put one there last week, I'll say.
There wasn't one yesterday, and there wasn't one down by Headwaters at that property either.
Well, that one is not up for a vote today.
I understand that.
Okay. Are there other questions of staff? Commissioner Batty?
I got another computer here, so I just pulled up the GIS map to look at that site in a little bit more detail and an aerial. You mentioned that there was going to be a buffer of trees on the west there. That's really not shown on the plan. I mean, they're showing buildings within a few feet of the property line to the west there, unless north is, it looks to me like north is up on this plan. Yep. I mean, isn't that what you just said, John or Donovan?
No, I was referring to on the west side. I believe that the applicant's proposing.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The west end, they're building right up to the property line there.
That's a proof of parking area. So they're not actually building that. at this time.
Okay, all right, I'm sorry. I see the dashed lines now.
I believe that's a 20-foot distance between that property line and that pavement edge, proposed pavement edge there.
Other questions of staff? Commissioner Keen?
20 feet is not a buffer. To me, 20 feet is not a buffer between commercial business and residential business or residential housing. 20 feet is really nothing there, so. Are they aware of down the road, Everton's going to be rebuilt and there's going to be sidewalks and all that?
Yes, they are aware of that.
Other questions of staff on the report?
So
Commissioner Batty?
do you have any idea where they're at, Donovan, with the watershed here? You know, because they're up against wetlands and looks like they're gonna fill some wetlands and, I mean, they can't start the grading until they have their watershed permit, right?
Correct, yeah, and as of last Friday, there were a number of items to be completed for that. But that is a, you know, what is it, a recommendation, the staff recommendation is that they, you know, obtain that permit prior to initiation of grading.
Okay,
Are there other questions of staff? I have one. Donovan, I'm looking at the plan here, and tonight's motion is just for the grading permit, and I understand that. And we anticipate that they will submit an application at a future meeting to change the zoning here. So if we looked at this tonight and said, yep, we're fine with this grading, presuming that the watershed district kind of gives the thumbs up on those challenges and the details along those lines. But in 2 weeks or a month or whenever that application comes, we decided that this property was more suitable in the zoning of the higher density residential that it is today, and we wanted to leave it at that and not allow that change. Tell me what happens. I mean, do they have a graded property that they then, or do they have a case against the city saying, well, you approve the grading, but now you're not going to go to the next step? What happens?
Well, what happens is that with city approval and meeting those conditions, and they begin grading activity, they can complete the grading plan. The watershed rules require that any sort of soil disturbance that's being undisturbed for more than 2 weeks has to be stabilized. So at that point, this is what will probably happen because of the delay of the longer review. For instance, for the PUD, that's, you know, a total of 4 public meetings, as well as the comp plan amendment. That's the Met Council review. That just getting through the city process probably is, you know, sometime in July, in the best case scenario. So in the meantime, the applicant will have to hydroseed the site, so the soil will be stabilized. Trees, you know, for a good portion of the trees would be removed, and, you know, each application, it stands on its own. There's no guarantee that any future approvals will come, and the applicant is taking a risk preparing the site with this, you know, putting expending that cost to move the dirt and to, you know, shape the land for future development. But that's something that, you know, that's a risk they undertake. That's not an obligation for the city to follow with subsequent approvals on applications.
I appreciate that outline. Thank you. Were there other questions on the staff report? Commissioners? Seeing none. Dan Undum, can you pull up the applicant if they're available? Or their representative, whoever it is. I believe it's Jerry Anderson. You may have to unmute yourself and then we'll allow you to give a presentation or answer any questions that you might have heard from commissioners.
All right, can you hear me? Are you
Yep.
able to hear? me?
We
Okay,
can hear you.
okay. So actually, the review that Donovan just gave you is very accurate. First of all, in terms of the property, the applicant is looking to remove trees, grade the property, and prepare the property for development.
Hey,
If-
hey, Jerry, can I stop you just for 1 second? I thought you were the applicant. I should have looked at that on the piece. Can you just identify who you are in relation to the
Okay,
applicant?
yes, I'm sorry. I'm
Thank you.
Jerry Anderson of Jam Architects. I'm representing the applicant this evening. The applicant is Dick Biagini, and I am been hired by Dick to represent him this evening. He is unavailable. So,
Thank you.
at any rate, Donovan's description is very accurate from the standpoint that we are on the Planning Commission meeting for the 26th to review the project itself. We have full disclosure and full project documentation coming through on the 26th. But in the meantime, we're trying to get the tree removal to proceed. We're trying to get the grading to proceed and get the site prepared for development. The preparation of the site development is independent actually of whether we put the mini storages in or apartment buildings in or townhomes, whatever the case might be. The second thing I would like to mention is with respect to the property on the west, we are maintaining, if you look at the newest plan, and I'm not sure if Donovan has that available to him, but the newest plan shows at the close point, 23.5 feet to the back of the curb from the west property line. As you go south, it tapers a little bit and becomes slightly wider. But the proposal that we have in our discussions with the three property owners that abut the property to the west, they would prefer that we place a fence 5 feet from the curb line, leave the trees that are behind that. We have agreed to them with that. And hopefully they will be available here at the public hearing this evening. Certainly they'll be available for tomorrow night with our neighborhood meeting regarding the process to go through so that we can be on the agenda for the 26th. But basically, two of the three property owners have also approached the owner with the possibility of purchasing the remains of the wetlands to preserve the wetlands. And that discussion is something the developer has agreed to them to enter into. The other items that I would like to bring up are we have an existing approach and entrance into the project. The contractor who will be doing the grading has made application for the new drive, which is being required by Washington County to be moved to the south. But the existing, we don't have to do any grading to enter the site because that approach and that driveway is already in. The new driveway is part of the application that we have into the county at this point in time. We're simply waiting for them to fulfill that permit to the contractor. The second thing is we have a SWIP plan. The contractor already has the SWIP. He has the permit for the SWIP. We have purchased all of the wetland credits from the state of Minnesota. We have permission from them to proceed. We've been through the approvals with the DNR. We've been through the approvals with Army Corps of Engineers. We have all of those letters. All of those approvals are in place. The only two items that are outstanding relative to Caprock with the with the wetlands relative are, number one, we have to provide them with a letter of credit, which will be available on Friday. We also have that same letter of credit, credit that's going to be going to the city of Forest Lake relative to this permit for $27,000, which will be available on Friday. Signing of the development agreement, which we are prepared to do. And the only other item, I believe, outstanding with the wetlands issue is the maintenance agreement, which has been dropped off and paid for and is awaiting documentation from Washington County. So as far as the Rice Creek watershed is concerned, we have two issues. One is the maintenance agreement being documented and recorded, which took place a couple of days ago. And that's probably available via the internet right now. And the second issue would be the letter of credit, which will be available on Friday.
Does that conclude your presentation, Mr. Anderson?
Yes, unless you have any specific questions you would like me to answer.
Our commission loves to ask questions. Hang on. So
That sounds good to
Commissioner
me.
Keen?
Yeah. Yes, Jerry, when you mentioned on that west side, you said it's 23 feet from the property line to the back of that curb line?
Yes, that's on the north side, it's a little bit narrower than it is on the south side because that property line runs at a little bit of a bias from north to south.
Okay,
And 23.5 feet to the back of the curb at the north side of the curb. It's slightly wider than that south side. I doubt it's much more than a foot.
and then you're gonna put a fence in 5 feet from the back of that curb line.
Yes,
That's-
they've asked us to put a fence in 5 feet from the back of the curb line. That is correct.
And they're fine with that. That's only 18 feet.
That's correct. Yep. They, you know, the thing of it is a lot of the homeowners along that side they've got boat storage and they've got all sorts of things going on back there. We're not concerned about that. We are happy to provide them with whatever their needs are. The owner of this project is not requiring them to remove stuff from his property, even though there might be some infractions. And so the homeowners generally, those three homeowners that abut our property are happy with what's happening here.
Okay.
Were there other questions from commissioners to the applicant? Commissioner Batty?
Jerry, I'm interested to know how the grade and cut and fill balances out on this site.
Well, we have balanced the fill. The property has been, the grading is done by a company called Chuck. It's actually done by Chuck Plow Engineering Company. And we have had a grading contractor who the owner has hired and is awaiting his ARNT construction. And they have worked together to balance the cut and fill on the site as closely as possible. We still are going to have to import some soils, but for the most part, the grading plan that's proposed, if you go along the north property line from east to west, the first 150 feet from the east going to the west ranges in from our property line to our grade ranges from 3.5 feet of difference to about 5.5 feet of difference. Now, the difference being that our finished grade is below the grade at the property line. There are two existing lines of retaining walls along that side. When you get to the middle third of the property, we're actually looking at a range of elevation difference from our finished grade to the existing grade at the top of that property line, we're actually looking at a difference of approximately 6 feet to almost 11 feet. And then the back third of the property as you go west, again, starts to drop back down, and it's approximately 6 feet of variation. So the roof lines of our buildings are hardly even visible when you're standing above the property line to the north of our property line.
So I'm just looking at this, the grading plan. It's your drawing C2 here. And you're showing, it looks like one retaining wall that goes the full length of the property. Am I reading that correctly?
That is correct. We are building a new retaining wall below the existing retaining walls. So our new retaining wall will be approximately 4 feet high, which means that for the most part, we are only sloping across that 10 feet up to the property line. For the most part, we're sloping up either somewhat flat or up 2 feet. The middle third of that is a little steeper than that.
Okay, so the where there shows a double retaining wall along there, that's those two pieces are existing retaining walls on somebody else's property.
That is correct. They're right on the property line supposedly, and they coexist in conjunction with the apartment buildings and the townhomes to the north of us.
Other questions of commissioners to the applicant? Commissioner Batty? Sorry, I thought you were done.
Yeah, well, it's okay. I knew I had another question. I just remember what it was. Jerry, explain this proof of parking on the west end there.
Well, the proof of parking is there, and that's something that we're looking at in conjunction with the PUD that will be coming before you on the 26th. It doesn't really relate to the grading plan itself, but your code for storage units requires that there's one parking stall for each 10 units of storage that's provided. And we're showing proof of parking because we really don't want to build that parking unless it's absolutely necessary. The parking, putting parking spots in a storage facility like this does two things. And both of those things are running against what you would prefer to happen. First of all, in a storage facility like this, there's no outdoor storage allowed. If we put parking spots in, we're going to have people abandoning fixtures and appliances and whatever that we may or may not be able to catch on camera simply because they can't. You might find abandoned cars.
Okay. We'll talk about that on the 20th.
Right. But the proof of parking shows that we can accommodate the 41 stalls that are required. However, we would prefer not to do that. That is part of the PUD that we are making application for.
Other questions of the applicant? Not seeing any, so we will move into the public hearing. Dan, do you want to go over the process, and if you have anyone at City Hall there that will speak first, and then the order of which they will be brought online?
Right now, there is nobody at City Hall who wishes to speak. If you are in as an attendee, I ask you right now to raise your hand if you wish to speak to the public hearing. I will go in order. I have a Craig Shield who has raised his hand. I will move him in as of right now to be able to speak.
Oh, hey, Dan, I was looking for more the process, and if you could just read the list so that they can all know up front where they land in it. Donovan has a letter he has to read, and I have one as well.
Sorry about that. I jumped
That's okay.
the gun there. Second, if you want to wait, if you want to take care of the attendees, it would be the next one in line would be Michelle Von Wald, be after Craig.
All right. Donovan, did you want to read your letter first?
Yes, I will do so. This letter is from Rick and Pat Anderson. I don't have their address here. Greetings. My wife and I are concerned about the path the Planning Commission is going down with the proposal for a storage facility on Everton. We realize that they are tasked with working on such projects, but the concern I have is that we, who live under a mile from the proposed site, have not heard anything about this prior to yesterday. No mailers, nothing online, no information, or any requests on public input on the project. Our city has the ability to do great things with the undeveloped land and turn Forest Lake into a model city. The problem with that is it appears that the Planning Commission and Council are headed down a path of only looking at low-income housing and light industrial type development. Walk that piece of land that they want to put the storage unit on. Tell me that isn't a great location for a city park. Its accessibility to the community around it via entrance trails that could be made. There's room for a small parking area and the views are wonderful. I don't even live on the border properties, but I can only imagine how they will feel about the change in views they have of the wetland turning into storage units. In these days of social isolation, there needs to be a greater emphasis on talking to the community about any development proposals that are brought forward. That was what was submitted.
All right, thank you. I'm going to read one that was passed on to me from Mayor Bain, and she indicated that it came through her Facebook page from a Lisa Gaughan, Gaughn. I do not have an address, but I believe the person lives nearby. It says, Mara, I live in a neighborhood behind Menards, which is very close to the proposed storage building construction. Most of the residents in this development were not notified of the public meeting tonight. We are all concerned as this will decrease our home value for one. In addition, the traffic on Everton is unbelievable at its best. Adding this construction would only add to traffic problems we are already facing. I find it discouraging that the city would rather put up storage buildings than build another park, which we desperately need. We have had so many apartments added to our development and nothing new added to our park system. Unfortunately, due to previous commitments, we are unable to attend tonight. Please take some of this into consideration for tonight's meeting. And it was from Lisa Gaughan. So those were the two people that I'm aware of that asked to have comments put into the public record. And we will now open up the public hearing. I believe Craig Schneel, you're up first. We're gonna allow you to speak. We usually give you a few minutes. Generally speaking, in the public hearing for you and the others up next. Typically, commissioners don't interact during public hearings. We tend to be listeners at this point. Although if you have a technical question, sometimes staff will jump in and answer those. So go ahead, Craig.
Okay, very well.
If you could state your name and address for the record to start.
My name is Craig Scheel. I live at 22093 Ethan Court. I'm also with the other homeowners that live on the west side of the proposed property. I have had some conversations with the builder, Dick, and some of the things that we talked about were true. He did say that he was going to leave a 23-foot buffer back there and not remove any of the trees, but I was under the impression that he wanted to put up a chain link fence rather than a proposed from you guys a pine fence. And I had agreed with that, but I thought that would have been on the back side of the 23 feet rather than us looking at a chain link fence and then looking into some trees. So our biggest concern here is it's not that the mini storage is going in per se, because something's going to go there, and I guess we'd rather see that. But what is our view going to look like moving forward? Are we going to, that's our biggest concern. People next door, they are going to be looking at the south end of the property, and if there's a chain link fence running down the entire south side of it, they're gonna see when the trees are gone, they're gonna be seeing all the mini storage. They're gonna see the dealerships, all the bright lights from the dealerships that we hadn't seen in the past. The tops of the townhouses, as we all will. So our concerns are just what kind of buffers are we gonna get when this is all done? You have anything to add?
Yeah, sure. I'll add a little bit.
I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second. If you could state your name and your address for the record, please.
Yep, my name is Jim Liddycoat. This is my wife, Emily Liddycoat. We live at 22091 Ethan Court. We are the farthest south house in the cul-de-sac that borders this property. My wife and I actually just bought this house in December, and a big selling point of this house was the marshland and the tree line behind the house. It's gorgeous nature views. We have lots of wildlife, and that seems like it's all going away now. It's a little bit concerning because it is a residential area, and we are now facing a mini storage in our backyard. So we are concerned with what our property value looks like in the future. If we go to sell our house, what that's going to look like for people who walk through and see mini storage in the backyard instead of a nice nature views like what we thought Forest Lake was all about. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
And was it Emily? Did you have comments as well?
I just echo what Craig and Jim have already shared. We have a lot of wildlife back there, so I am concerned what's going to happen to them when all these trees are removed. And come in.
Thank you, Dan. Do you want to bring up the, I'm sorry, I didn't know there was a fourth person. Do you say your name and address for the record?
My name is Sharon Kanabi and my address is 22095 Ethan Court. And I am the northernmost house on the west side of the cul-de-sac. So my backyard also will face this proposed mini storage. And I'm concerned about the trees. I bought the lot for the trees, and now I'm gonna look at buildings and lights shining into my windows with no buffer. Jerry had stated, I believe his name was Jerry, had stated that he had talked to us about a buffer and all that. None of us three in the cul-de-sac has spoken to him, have agreed to anything. We are not okay with what they have proposed. We moved here for the scenic views, for the trees, for the view, and it's being ripped away from us. We're not okay with this. We're willing to work with him, but what he stated when it was his time to talk was not what we agreed to. We've never spoken with him. So we're kind of in the dark with all of it.
Is there anyone else in that group there?
Nope, that's it.
All right, thank you. Dan, can you bring up the next person? Dan Undum? You're on mute.
Yep, I just did the promotion. It should be coming in now.
All right, we have Michelle Van Wald, I believe. If you could
Hi.
state your name and address, and how many people are there with you?
I have my partner, Vic Stark, is with me. My name is Michelle Von Wald. I'm the property owner in the Gateway Green Cottage community, 22291 Cameo Court. I am the one that is on the northeast side of the grading project. I've heard a lot of feedback from Mr. Anderson regarding the west side, but I too, as a property owner, have great concerns about the loss of trees and the clearing of trees and the privacy and protection of my property value, as well as sound barrier. I'm right on the corner of Everton. I too am in great agreement of the need for a community park in place for that area with all of the development that has happened. So I just wanted to, my partner Vic Stark might be adding to the concerns I have regarding that.
Okay.
Vic, go ahead.
Hi.
If you could just state your name and address for the record.
My name's Vic Stark, and I live at 32 Northwest 4th Avenue, Forest Lake. There are a few technical points that I wanted to bring up. After reviewing the plans that were submitted, one of the things that came up that I noticed immediately was that the plan, I'm going to look at C3. I think it's on a couple other plans also, but the existing, quote, existing retaining wall shown that runs the length of the Gateway Green project along its south property line, which would be the north property line of the proposed project. That does not exist in reality. There are retaining walls back there along that line or near that line that are shown. Those are the ones that are, there's one, Jerry referred to about a third of the way through across the project from east to west. You'll see there are 2 lines of retaining walls shown. The northernmost one does exist. And then again, further to the west, towards the west corner, is another place where 2 retaining walls are shown. And that northern wall does exist, but the southern line of wall that is shown along the south line of the Gateway Green project does not exist. And it's called out with top of wall and bottom of wall elevations that I don't know where those came from, if they came from the original Gateway Green construction documents, but they that wall simply does not exist. So one of the questions we have is if that wall, is not there, would that wall have to be built by the people that are by Mr. Biagani's company? Also, some other points that we wanted to make were, yes, you're talking about the tree buffer line on the west side, where in what's shown in these documents is that the entire south property line will lose all tree buffers. And so any privacy and or for both sound and visual privacy for anybody who has a townhome or apartment building facing south, as Michelle does, will lose all of that. And there's nothing shown in here that would replace it. So, we do have some questions, that the southern face of these buildings, the townhomes, are about 20 feet from the property line. And looking at this drawing, then the next, within 3 or 4 feet would be the northern edge of the paved area for the mini storage. And then about maybe 20 feet more, 24 feet more, I'm not sure how wide the driving areas are actually, it's not shown. I'm going by the, using measuring it with a scale ruler, but then the buildings begin. So there is no room there for any kind of tree buffer. And if there are no tree buffers, if there's some kind of security fence, how tall would it be? And would it actually do anything for our visual and or sound barrier loss in this area? I have a couple other notes. Excuse me, I have to find them. We're working at an ad hoc tabletop. No. Where's?
I'd like to just, while he's looking for his notes, I'd like to just emphasize once again, as a property owner, my concern for my property value, but also the great need that we have with all the development of residential apartment buildings in this area, the great need for a community park.
Okay, I'm back. This is Vic again. So looking at the plans that were included that we were able to look at, it shows pretty much all trees being cleared from the north face or the northern line of the property for the structures, which looks like it would include every tree that is in existence for Michelle's south perspective, south facing. I've pointed out the retaining wall issue. I'm not sure where that confusion came from. And I've also mentioned the security/privacy fence. The location of any fencing has not been shown on any of the plans that I've seen. And I'd like to know what those are and what the materials intended to be are and the height. And I know that this is getting beyond the grading part of the project. We're getting into the actual project itself, but I do have questions, and I think it was brought up on the staff notes on page 30 or 31 of the staff notes. There is a question actually it's page 32 of the staff notes that were included in tonight's package. There's no landscape plan being shown at this point, which might include any trees that were intended to be planted, and the I suppose would be the turf areas. And there's no lighting plan or photometric plan that has been included. And it'd be nice to know, if this project were to move forward and be built, how much light noise would be expected by people who no longer would have any kind of buffer there. And I think that, I believe those are all of my points. Michelle?
I think that about covers it.
All right, thank you. Dan, can we pull up the next person to speak?
I believe that was all I had for hands raised who wanted to speak.
All right, I'm going to open up the chat. If there's somebody else that wishes to speak as part of the public hearing, please write that in the chat, either openly to everybody or to City of Forest Lake, or pick me in there. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds or so before I close the public hearing.
Mr. Shield has his hand up again.
You want to bring him back on?
I can do that.
Mr. Shield, you're on mute, but go ahead.
This is Jim Liddycoat again. I'm the southernmost house in the cul-de-sac 22091 Ethan. And I just wanted to make a note. I know earlier it was said that normally with these types of projects, the trees are replaced with the ones that are cut out. And I just wanted to, throw up the question that why is this not the norm for this project? I understand it's the marsh, it's the wetland. There's no other place to plant these trees, but that should have been taken into consideration long before this point. It's, like we said, it's not fair for us to have all these trees gone in the buffer, the light pollution from the car dealerships, the light pollution from 35, all the cars. It's not fair for the townhomes that are bordering this that will now look into our backyards. This is pretty huge. So we just need to take that into consideration, and the planning needs to really look deep into this. So that's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I believe I saw in the chat feature that the applicant Representative Jerry Anderson wished to speak in the public hearing as well.
Yes.
You can go ahead.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. All right. So first of all, in terms of the homes to the west, I wasn't proposing that. I was the one that had the discussion with him. It's my understanding that Mr. Dick Biagini, the owner, was the one that processed discussions with those people. I was simply referring to discussions that he informed me of. I'm sorry that Dick was not available this evening. Secondly, we are not looking at placing a fence on the property line where you would look at the fence and the trees would be behind. We're looking at placing the fence 5 feet behind our curb line to allow for some snow storage when we plow. So you would be looking at 18.5 to 19.5 or 20 feet of trees and then the fence line. Secondly, relative to some of the comments that Mr. Vic Stark had to make, the retaining wall that's shown that goes along the entire north property line is a new wall that's being proposed in conjunction with our grading. And that wall is to be constructed. It is not existing there. We simply show the 2 existing walls, and then we show our proposed wall that's being constructed there as well. Our curb line is 10 feet off the north property line. So there is 2 5-foot buffers along that side. The townhomes that they're referring to that they live in are actually somewhere between 3.5 and 5.5 feet above our finished grade. So we also propose a fence line, screen fences along those lines of where those townhomes exist there on the east end and also on the west end. So we are looking at providing screen fences. If that screen fence were 6 feet high, we would have approximately 9.5 feet of screening that you would have available to you in terms of our existing buildings or our proposed buildings. So you would not be looking at the buildings. Also, any of the light lines that would be generated from lights on those buildings for circulation in the parking lot and whatnot, those lights are all at a point where you would not get any direct light at all. There would be no points of light to any of the homeowners along the north and west property lines. Those, especially the north line, anywhere from 3.5 feet to 11 feet, those lights are going to be just above the doors at 7 or 8 feet high, and they're going to be well below the grade, much less the fence lines that will be provided in those installations. A lot of, Vic, a lot of the items that you brought up are items that relate to the 26th Planning Commission meeting. And they're not a part of this particular submittal simply because they're part of the PUD and the CUP application.
Was that all you had for the public hearing, Mr. Anderson?
Yes, at this time, unless anybody has additional questions for me.
The commission may, so hang on. Is there anybody else that's raised their hand, Dan?
At this point, no.
I see.
Michelle just raised her hand one more time.
If you can bring Michelle on.
Will do.
Michelle, you'll need to unmute yourself and then you can go ahead.
Okay. Hi. Yep, my question is in regard to the property owners that were consulted on the west side. I did not have that opportunity here on the northeast. In fact, I just learned of this meeting within the last week. So that would have been beneficial to get a scope, or it seems like there's some consideration that's being granted for some of the homeowners, and I would like to be included in that if this project goes through. I guess that would be my last comment. And thank you, by the way, for inviting me in to have a voice.
And, of course. And this is Vic Stark again. Thank you, Jerry, for clarifying the retaining wall issue. when I looked at the plans, I did not see anything that in the legend that said that there was a proposed wall for the project. All I saw was an existing wall notation in the legend, and so I assumed wrongly that the wall that was being shown there was supposed to exist already. So thank you for clarifying that, Jerry, and thank you for clarifying the other things regarding the lights and the fencing, being that none of that stuff was shown on the grading plan, which I expect it wouldn't be, but those were things that were brought up in the staff report, both the landscape plan, a lighting plan. Those things will be covered, I believe, in a future meeting.
Correct.
I do have a question or a comment in that, yes, the wall and a wall with a fence on it will probably mean that if we're looking straight out of our first floor window, we won't be looking at directly into the doors of any buildings or right at the buildings. But I do believe that we will be looking down on the whole property project, that we will be basically looking across the tops of the roofs instead of looking into a wild and wooded area that has had a lot of wildlife in it and a lot of enjoyment for the people that live here. I'm also would like to comment, I'm very surprised that there are not more people that are involved that live in these townhomes and apartments involved in this meeting. That's kind of surprises me a lot. I don't know if it was because of a lack of communication or if we have a lot of people here that are renters and don't think that they really have any skin in the game, so to speak. Again, thank you for inviting us to be able to address everybody publicly, and thank you.
Thank you, the Von Wald household. Dan, is there anybody else that's raised their hand?
Yeah, Mr. Shield raised his hand one more time.
Do you want to bring him up? Mr. Shield, you'll need to unmute yourself, then you can go ahead.
This is Jim Liddycoat again. And I want to make a comment that we were not, the cul-de-sac here, Ethan Court, we were not contacted prior to this. The only reason that we knew about this was when my wife and I moved in, I noticed pink wetland delineation flags within the marsh, and I contacted Donovan back in November, and he alerted me to the project, and we had been in contact since, as well as my neighbors in the cul-de-sac. So we did not receive, special notification or anything. There was, what I think would agree that there is a lack of communication up until about a week ago or a week and a half ago with these notices that went out. So that's all I had to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Shield household. Dan, is there anybody else that's raised their hand?
No, not at this time.
And if there's someone else that wishes to speak, please make a comment or in the chat box or raise your hand. I'll leave it open for about 30 seconds before we close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Still have no one, Dan?
No one at this point.
All right. We will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Mr. Undum, I thank you for running that. It seemed pretty smooth from my end for a public hearing remote. I think this is the first one the city has ever done. So, commissioners, do you have comments or a motion that would be appropriate at this time?
Could I interrupt just to make one announcement that would relate to the public testimony?
Yes.
The project team, Jerry Anderson and Dick Biagini, are holding a neighborhood meeting virtually tomorrow evening at 6:30 related to the PUD CUP comp plan amendment applications. They'll be on the next planning commission agenda. So if you've not received that mailing, I encourage anyone to reach out to me. My email address is on the city website in the zoning division, and I can give you information on how to to log into that Zoom meeting tomorrow night, 6:30. That's May 14th.
And thank you, Donovan. And I'll clarify some of the communication piece too. It was brought to my attention yesterday by Commissioner Young that there may have been a need or a desire to have expanded communication. And I suspect the city met the legal requirements of publishing in the newspaper, which very few people probably read, and posting at City Hall, where of course no one is going at the moment, and those sorts of pieces. But I did post it on the relatively popular Forest Lake Happenings Facebook page, and I posted it on Nextdoor widely across the city for anyone that's on those social media apps. This meeting, tomorrow's meeting, another neighborhood meeting next week, the other public hearing we held tonight. If someone has a suggestion of other ways we can communicate, please send the mayor, send myself, somebody at City Hall, a message on how we can expand that. I don't think it's the intent of anyone at City Hall or this commission to not have these meetings involve the public. So we'll open it up to commissioners. I see Commissioner Batty's hand raised. Do you want to go?
Just on that point to start with, Donovan, are you saying that we don't have as part of our ordinance, a notification of adjacent property owners within a certain distance of the property?
No, we certainly do have that. And if you could even have some testimony from Karen about the number of notifications we sent out for this project in particular, the number of townhomes in the Gateway Green. Sorry?
They were sent out.
Certainly,
Absolutely.
yes.
Okay.
And it's all, it's code required 350 feet within the subject property. So we did everything from, the Wilcox Chevrolet to the Gateway Green projects, MnDOT, Washington County, then all those other, a good number of properties along Ethan Avenue, Ethan Court, a little bit in Evergreen Circle. So there was, I believe it was about, I think it was over 100 notices that were sent out.
I'm comfortable with that. That's fine.
Okay.
Okay. In regard to this is another procedural thing. Do you know yet, Donovan, what the drawing package looks like for what we're going to see on the 26th here? I look at this site plan and I understand, width of drive and size of these units and that kind of stuff. And this thing has been shoehorned into that plan. And I know that the developer is just going to cry uncle if we, if some of these issues that have been brought up here tonight are going to be addressed in the way that this thing is designed. And I guess here's my concern. If we approve this grading plan, that automatically takes with it the tree removal goes right along with, obviously has to happen before the grading can start. And that's my concern here, is that if we approve this thing the way this is tonight, they're going to come in there and they're going to clear cut that entire site, except for a few trees on the west end there. And I don't know. I don't want to come off as being anti-development here because I'm not, but this troubles me. This site plan troubles me here because it is so I'll use the same word again, shoehorned onto this site. And I understand that, and the north-south issue is the crucial one, but the length of this thing can be varied. And we could place a condition on this thing to have them move away from that west property line. It would, let's see, it's 5 units wide. So for every, I'm guessing those units are what, 12 to 15 feet wide, something like that. Not much more than that. So taking out one, vertical row of units would move it 15 feet further away from that west property line. And I can tell you that on the 26th, I'm going to raise some of these issues because I just think I don't know if they're just trying to see if they can, I understand that, that economics is a good bit of this thing, but I find it hard to believe that this thing has to be shoehorned in there as tightly as it is. I understand from the north-south dimension that it pretty much has to work the way they've got it shown. But from in the east-west direction, it could be shortened up so that it wasn't as close to that west property line as they're currently showing it. In my mind, if they're asking for proof of parking and then they're going to put up they're going to tell the owners they're not going to cut down trees and they're going to put up a fence, that's, that doesn't fly with me. I think if they're going to show proof of parking, they show proof of parking. And I absolutely think that there has to be some kind of a west end buffer on this project that's permanent, that's they're going to be there forever, regardless of how much parking they need.
Well, Commissioner Batty, I think you do raise an interesting point, and this is a unique application since it is what we are reviewing is a grading permit. The ability to remove trees and grade the site according to the submitted plan. However, we also have submitted for future planning commission agenda a plan that is almost I haven't done a full review, but looks almost very similar, if not identical, as far as layout of the units, stormwater entrance, fence line. I mean, there is a fence in that plan, and that is part of a PUD. That is a part of a PUD application, and a purpose of the planned unit development application, is to provide benefits that and will provide flexibility for the developer for certain criteria, and then also provide benefits that benefit the developer, but also benefit the public as well. And one of them is to preserve, enhance, and protect desirable site characteristics, open spaces, and valuable natural resources. And obviously, much of the site is wetlands, and there is some proposed wetland replacement, but that, I don't know the percentage, but it's it's a slight minority of the total wetland on the site. So it's really, that wetland area is largely being preserved. There is a provision within the plan unit development zoning text that the design of a PUD shall take into account the relationship of the site to surrounding areas. The perimeter of the PUD shall be designed to minimize any undesirable impact of the development on adjacent properties, and conversely, to minimize any undesirable impact of adjacent land use and development characteristics on the PUD. So, working both ways. So, I believe it's within the, understanding that this is a grading permit, also there is, for a future, near future consideration of plan unit development, it'd be within Planning Commission's authority to take into consideration this PUD application and set conditions of approval that would be consistent with the PUD overlay district.
Hey, Donovan, what is the zoning district of this property at the moment?
It's highway business.
And what is it in the 2040 comp plan that we have coming up?
It is it's a future land use of high density residential.
Okay. Now, the woodland preservation policy, I heard you answer a question earlier referencing that the standards, I'm paraphrasing, but the standards were lower because it's commercial or along those lines. Knowing that our 2040 comp plan is coming up, what would the woodland preservation policy have on this property, knowing that that would be the zoning for this district?
The zoning, actual rezoning won't occur for, maybe a year or so. So we have to kind of we have to apply the zoning that is current, what the zoning map says, which is that B2 highway business. Looking at the woodland preservation rules, which do define a significant woodland as 15,000 square feet in size, which is about a third of an acre. Looking at the submitted survey of existing conditions, I did a calculation, and I do not believe that the that the existing woodlands reach that 15,000 square foot threshold.
So we as a city essentially have no policy that would protect any type of tree buffer like this on property lines unless they meet 15,000 square foot threshold.
Yes, basically. And then if, within this, with the future high density residential, assuming that becomes multiple family zoning district, they could remove up to 50% of the trees and not be subject to tree replacement. But if, within the PUD rules, I think those can be applied to require some tree replacement, or if it's not, or if it is removed, a replacement of the trees so that the impact on neighboring properties is lessened.
But we don't have a PUD in front of us today.
Correct.
And if we approve the grading plan, as Commissioner Batty stated, they can essentially come in, clear cut, regrade, and then we tell them to plant a few 6-foot trees.
That's
I don't know. I don't,
scenario.
and I don't mean to put you in this spot. It's not your proposal, Donovan. I'm just saying I don't know that this is necessarily the best pathway of getting where we're at, or I almost wish we had everything. It's nice knowing what the developer is going to bring, because I have less concern about approving a grading. I have more concern about a lot of the things that are coming forward, and quite frankly, a lot of things the people brought forward that I just don't have answers to, like the photometric lighting plan, sound barriers. I have oftentimes, when we went through our 2040 comp plan, talked about the buffers and the importance of looking at policy between industrial or commercial or business and residential. And this is exactly where those two things are coming up. I think it's one of the reasons exactly why we, in our 2040 comp plan, are looking at moving that towards a residential zoning, because quite frankly, it fits that neighborhood a whole lot better. I'm not saying that a mini storage wouldn't work here, but I think we've, as a community, spent a lot of time in those pieces. But another piece that came up, and I'll ask another question, the community park, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember right, on the west side of 35, there is only one proposed park in the comp plan, and that is north of Broadway. And if I remember right from park board discussions in the past, that is because there is a park literally in the neighborhood right to the west, I believe, named after a fallen officer we had a number of years ago. Is that a correct statement, Donovan?
Yes, that is. Yeah, up in that
So
upper
there
northwest.
is no community park planned for this area, and whether it's a mini storage that goes here, a residential piece, whatever it is that goes in here, we have no long-term plans for a park in this area beyond the one that's already there.
That is correct. I'll also add, as part of discussions I've had with Dick Biagini, the owner, is that initially he did try to put a multiple family project. More at that entrance, there's kind of a triangular shaped piece of high ground. And he did create some concept plans and could not make it work to his satisfaction. So that's when they shifted to the self-storage project plan.
Okay, thank you. Were there other comments from commissioners, or we certainly can entertain a motion? Commissioner Keen?
Okay, now I know this is just a grading plan, but I think this is in the back of everyone's mind is the next step. And if you look at the west side, all those storage facilities, or he's got the 3 of them there, if they just, something to think about is if they just backed off a couple of doors on each one of those ends, now you're now looking at an 18-foot barrier from property line, to the back of the curb or to the back of the fence. It gives them a little more room, and while they're grading, if there's some decent trees in there, they could save them so they don't have to go out and buy and plant trees later. So I'm just throwing that out there. I know it's a grading plan and not step 2 yet, so.
I agree, Commissioner Keen. I think there is definitely things to do, and I'm not going to call anybody out of order that's talking about things that's coming up in the future on this particular plan, because the developer has presented it to us as to what it is, and if it even remotely comes close to the grading plan, I think it's worth the discussion tonight. The in more direct reference to the grading plan, another thing they could do is move, I believe it's called Pond 1. It's kind of on the west side of the mini storages. They could move that pond between the end and those trees, causing an even larger buffer to the west and having a straight pass-through road that doesn't curve around a pond. My suspicion is it'd actually be cheaper for the developer to put the pond over there. It would create a bigger buffer, and it would probably create greater uniformity of a mini storage that I'm not completely sold on yet. That's one idea. On the north side, they potentially could move ponds up there, causing a greater buffer in that direction, and I'm sure that would shrink some of their hopes to have as many mini storage pieces on that site as they have. The proof of parking on the far west side, I'm extremely concerned about that, as Commissioner Batty said, of putting a proof of parking that would take away a feature that they're essentially using to accommodate neighbors. In all honesty, commissioners, I'm not ready to support this tonight outside of a table motion, but I'm looking forward to any of your comments. Commissioner Miller?
I think I would agree, Eric, Commissioner Legness, with what you just said. It seems really out of order that we're seeing this grading plan before we actually see the plan come forward with the grading plan. And I would not be opposed to not voting on this and tabling this to be brought back with the actual developing plans, so we can look at the whole piece as one and make some decisions.
Commissioner Young, I see you had your hand raised, and I apologize if that was sitting there for a while. I might have missed it.
No, it hasn't been there for a while. I wanted to let this play out. I am not ready to do the grading plan. I'm going to make a motion to table. We have not had the neighborhood meeting. We have not had, we don't know whether or not we're going to.
Commissioner Young, did you make the motion, or are you saying that you're going to?
I'm going to.
Thank you.
I'm going to. All right. At the end of the sentence. We have not had, Mr. Batty. We have not had.
He's right. You're kind of pushing it because you're not supposed to do that by Robert's rules. So if you don't tell us, you're probably within the compliance of that.
Point taken. Motion to table.
There's a motion to table. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Batty seconded. A motion to table is non-debatable. So Karen, can you please take a roll call? Hey, one second. A motion to table requires a time definite. Commissioner Young, can you clarify your motion to state your table?
I am tabling this motion until after the finalization of the plan for development. It does not need a date certain. It can also be a series of events. And for us to take a look at this seriously, we really need to understand much better what the plan for this property is.
And Commissioner Batty, does your second stand?
I don't know that I understood. I mean, Donovan earlier, let me just discuss this for a second.
We
Donovan,
can't discuss table motions.
Okay, but just an understanding here of what, okay, all right. Yeah.
If I could clarify, the final approval will not, city for the final PUD won't, even by the, best case scenario, will not occur until sometime in July. Just understand this is, preliminary PUD that's coming before the Plan Commission on the 27th. It'll go to then City Council on the 8th. Then they'll have to address, do a resubmittal and address, the applicant will, resubmit based on the feedback they received at the preliminary. And so then, that's going to have to push probably to the 1st July Plan Commission meeting on the, and then final, the 2nd July City Council meeting on the 20th. So please be aware with the motion of what date you mean, or please be specific with that.
The motion, as student correctly stated, does actually not need a date. It can be a point in time. Commissioner Batty, does your second stand with her clarification of the motion?
Yes.
Okay, it's non-debatable. Karen, can you please take a roll call?
Commissioner Young,
Aye.
Commissioner Keen,
Aye.
Commissioner Brink,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye. Commissioner
Batty,
Aye.
and Chair Langness.
Aye, motion carries. We can't further discuss this, but I will clarify to the public that doesn't understand what happened, because that was motions that don't commonly occur in meetings. We have essentially set this aside to a point in the future when something else occurs. You can reach out to staff if you want further clarification on when that might happen, but we're not going to be able to discuss that tonight in this meeting. because you can't discuss a table motion after it's occurred. We will move on to the next agenda item, which, looking in front of me here, sorry, bear with me. The Headwaters 123 Property Comprehensive Plan Amendment, and it's noted as discussion only on the agenda. Donovan, do you want to kick us off on that?
That thing in this thing.
Certainly. The,
They just tabled everything.
if I could,
Could you hold on? Dan, could you please mute the background noise? Thank you. Donovan, please continue.
certainly, I'd like to present for discussion purposes only. This is not a public hearing. A reconsideration of the Headwaters 123 Comprehensive Plan Amendment. As you recall, at the last Plan Commission meeting, we discussed this in rather kind of a more of a comprehensive look. In many ways, I think I was trying to accomplish too much within this amendment. Opportunity to amend, and would like now to propose something that's much more narrowly tailored to the need at hand. Aided in this presentation this evening is Dan Undum, Assistant City Administrator, who is also kind of the key person for the Headwaters 123 Economic Development Initiative, working with the EDA and other staff and consultants on preparing this property for future economic development. And so I just want to do a quick introduction and then allow Dan to speak a little bit more about this economic development initiative, provide history and just some more background so planning commissioners can understand its importance to the city, as well as be able to ask any questions of Dan, because he is the local expert on that. And then I'd like to go a little more in detail with what the comp plan amendment would consist of, to be brought back at a future date for more discussion for the planning commission. And but also, but want to hear from planning commissioners this evening if this is something that they could support in this somewhat embryonic form. I did provide the basic shifts in housing and acreage between different future land use categories to Met Council staff. I've not received any feedback on that yet. Tomorrow I have a call scheduled to discuss this. So again, this is somewhat preliminary, but wanted to get this before planning commissioners, just so that it's something that you can understand and have, you can take questions on, and then so that we go to a more formal public hearing, and that it can be more about what what the more of the public input can be taken, and there's just more understanding among the planning commissioners. Again, if I could provide the review, the property is 123 acres here. This is just south of Headwaters Parkway, east of Fenway Avenue, and then west of Highway 61. Surrounding it is farmland that is in agricultural use. Of course, we have the recreational amenity of Tannersbrook Golf Course to the south, and single family homes and some land in tillage to the east, and the parkway and single family homes, community center, YMCA, that sort of thing on the north, with some high density residential. The future land use plan does show this area as a mixture of this mixed use, shown here, the striped red and tan, and a portion of it, approximately 33 acres on the south side, as that low medium density residential. And so what the comp plan proposes is to convert the city-owned 123 acres of these two future land use categories to business park, which is shown here in this gray, which is across on the east side of 61 there. And so that's in a nutshell what the future land use plan would look like, to have that as gray. Now I'd like to turn it over to Dan, if you could provide some background on this Headwaters 123 Tech Corridor Initiative.
Can everybody hear me? So I want to make sure my mic is working. All right. So thanks, Donovan, for the introduction. I'm here just to kind of give a little bit of the history, some of the work that's been done to date on the site, and kind of want to kind of show some of the methodical and thoughtful approach that we've taken to the development of the site. A lot of this started back in 2014. We actually brought this parcel to the EDA at the time and said, do we want to actively market this for residential development at the time? The EDA came back and gave direction that they did not want to go residential development. Main reason was they did not want to compete with the private market. They figured that let the private land develop and then hold this land.
Commissioner Young.
Okay. So anyway, the direction we got was to not, actively market this as residential at the time. It then was submitted as part of a request for information that came from a company that was looking to site a technology-based business in the North Metro. Through that process, the site did rank very high. It made it through sort of the initial phases and actually got to the point where an on-site visit was actually done. I believe that was in early 2017 was when that process was undertaken. Go forward to about 2018, there was the technology corridor kind of started about that time. The technology corridor is a private-public partnership. There's a lot of local county governments, Washington County, Anoka County, Lino Lakes, City of Columbus, City of Forest Lake, Hugo's involved. We all are working together to try to site a technology-based business or a data center in the North Metro. And when I say data, I think the original focus was more on data center, but as we've sort of gone through and talked to consultants and gone through scoping exercises and kind of looked at what the use is, we're not limiting strictly to data centers. It's basically high-tech manufacturing, telemedicine firms. There's been a lot of movement towards rural hospitals will send radiology reads out to off-site radiologists to have those reads done. Those type of businesses require a lot of data pipeline. So you start to see pretty unique criteria, pretty strict criteria for where those sites or where those developments can take place. So when the technology corridor was kind of starting up, one of the first exercises we went through was we looked at the entire city of Forest Lake and started looking at where within the city would be a good spot to site a potential technology job center within the city. And kind of going through all the different sites that are within the area, this site did jump to the top of the pile pretty quickly. Reason being is that given where this is located, it does meet those, that narrow banded criteria. It does meet the initial sorting criteria that's used. One of the main things that data centers and tech firms look for is redundant power. This site is served currently by Connexus Energy. However, just a stone's throw away from that is Xcel's territory. Both Connexus and Xcel have said that they would be able to serve this site. So the redundant power is met there. Also, another initial sorting determination is the availability of high capacity fiber. One unique feature about this site is that it is right adjacent to high capacity fiber. A main fiber line does run adjacent to 61. With this property just being a stone's throw from 61, that high capacity fiber is right in the backyard of this particular site. So again, those two initial criteria were met, and kind of given the history of the site ranking high in requests for information that's kind of all from technology, we started looking at this saying, let's do a little bit further study on this to see if this actually will site in, so continue to meet criteria for development of technology. So what we did within the partnership within the tech corridor, is we started doing some study analysis on the parcel. One of the first things that you will see when an RFI comes out for these parcels has a wetland delineation or phase 1 environmental study been done. So we did go out, we did partner with the Washington County CDA, did perform a wetland delineation and a phase 1 environmental study for these. Again, looking for anything that's going to basically stop a tech company from coming in and developing this. Is there anything in those studies that would prevent that? Those were done last year. They both came back. There was no glaring, obstacles in those studies at this point for technology corridor or a technology business to site there. So we kind of continued on with the analysis of this site. One thing that we did do, Conexus Energy paid for a LiDAR equipped drone to fly the property. So we did do some contour mapping of the site. We do have a 3D model that we can kick out to firms who are starting to do like site layouts. We have a LiDAR flown 3D model that is available to them. So using our partnership with the tech firm, we have done some actual study work. A lot of this information is on the Invest in Forest Lake website, where we're posting a lot of this forward-facing information for this particular parcel. But beyond sort of the paid studies that we've been doing for this parcel, I've been involved in a lot of going through the criteria that site selectors use for citing technology-based businesses. We partnered with Great River Energy. They came out and spent an afternoon out here. And what Great River Energy has is they have a criteria or it's almost like a shovel-ready certification that criteria set that they had developed with Deloitte. And we actually put this site through that. So we put it through, basically ran it through its paces, looked at what the score was. I don't have the exact score in front of me right now, but it did rank high. And again, there was no major obstacles to pursuing technology development on this parcel based on that analysis. So kind of given the studies, given the scoring that we put it through, kind of brought it to the end of last year where we met with CBRE, the National Real Estate Firm, and met with their data center specialist and asked them, do we see this site developing technology? Do you see any red flags in this? And after meeting with him at length, he again said, no, this thing checks the boxes that need to be checked for a site selector to consider the site. So we did, at the end of 2019, contract with CBRE. So we do have a listing agreement with CBRE right now. It's in their data center portfolio. The nice thing about that is that our agents has both local, regional, and national contacts. So he's on the phone constantly with all the major players in technology who are looking to site tech corridor or tech-based businesses. And he feels too, after his analysis of it, that this site does score well in terms of what a site selector has. One thing in general that you'll see is based on the criteria that technology needs to cite is that you'll see a lot of cluster development happen. So typically when one site gets chosen, a lot of the surrounding areas get picked as well, just given the fact that that band it's pretty tough to meet that criteria set. So kind of, that's just sort of like a top coat of what's been done over the past few years for this site, for this parcel for development as technology. Kind of want to show you that we're not just kind of going into this thinking that with a feeling that it's going to develop towards technology. We're actually backing that up with studies, with the right approach to it. So we're taking that methodical approach to making sure that this does fit those boxes that technology firms are looking for. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I think that was a great summary, Dan. I think between you and other staff, the county staff, the EDA. You brought it to our attention. Council, if I'm not correct, has had this presented to them and supported it numerous times. And then I forget which state agency as well. So do you have any frame of idea of how much has been invested in the whole in time and finances to kind of, and don't get me wrong, this could be a phenomenal project in Forest Lake, but I'm just trying to gather how much investment has been placed into it at this point.
So the total investment between the study dollars, hard dollars, is right around 13,000. That's been invested for the phase 1 and for the wetland delineation and the drone flyover. Of that, the bulk of that came from grant funding. So we were going to partner with Washington County for the wetland delineation. Connex has actually paid for the flyover mapping. So a lot of what, from the city of Forest Lake's perspective, through our partnerships, we've been able to get a lot of the study work completed at minimal cost to the city. I think our total on the wetland delineation is right around $2,000 at this point. Staff time, I mean, I don't have a total number of hours I've spent in meetings or meeting with consultants, but it has been quite a few meetings through there. But I don't have an idea exactly how much of my time has been devoted to that study.
Commissioner Keen, did you have your hand raised?
Dan, so you said we scored pretty well. What exactly does that mean? You know, I mean, we scored pretty well, but are we there where we're shovel ready? Somebody wants to come in here, we're ready to go?
A great question, Commissioner Keen. In terms of scoring well, we're not at this point fully shovel ready. So what they look at is there any glaring omissions, anything that's going to come in? Because when we look at site selectors, they try to get you eliminated out of the pile first. You know, the first thing they'll look at is saying, oh, it's got, you know, it's too close to a railroad yard, so it's got a hazard condition that's there that's not going to let it site. When we went through all of those things, that basically things that you can't change about a parcel, there was nothing that showed that, you know, prevented this from developing in technology. Shovel ready certifications right now, when you look at data centers nationally, there is not a set of standards that allow for something to be certified as shovel ready. Deloitte does have their own criteria set, and they kind of they helped Great River Energy develop theirs, but they're not, you know, you pay, when you hire Deloitte, you pay for their brand that says this is a Deloitte certified site. That's a pretty significant investment to get to that level of shovel ready. So we're pretty much as shovel ready as you're going to get without making that investment to have the consultant kind of put their, you know, their seal of approval on it.
When you showed the map and you've got the gray area and you want it right above the golf course, everything to the east of that was striped. Is that also going to be gray from 61 over, included all that?
I'll defer that to Donovan on that one.
Donovan, you're on mute.
I will share with you the future land use plan again.
Yeah, I was just curious because you showed on the east side of 61, that gray area, and then you moved to the west side of 61, but there's some land in between there that was, it's the red and white stripes.
Right. So moving back to the 2040 future land use plan and zeroing in there, those are, it's only at this point, what I'm proposing is only the Headwaters 123 property. So there's a whole, and these are section of properties that are on the east side of, the west side of 61 that will remain in that mixed use. You know, it might be, you know, a developer might want to purchase these and include these and make this more a cohesive piece and almost kind of square this off if they want to. But at this point, we want to have the city-owned property is shovel ready, so we can get it. And, it's my belief that the zoning is one of the larger impediments to that.
Thank you.
Other commissioners? Not seeing anyone asking questions here, Donovan. What are you looking for I know you're not looking for a motion tonight as this is discussion only, but what are you looking for from us?
Basically, to gather questions, just kind of a general head nod. Because I don't have all, before, I want to have a conversation with Met Council staff on just that informal review. But I really, just want to gain a greater understanding from, and just kind of I guess, the basic consensus of the planning commission that they understand this is a big, priority of the city.
Commissioner Batty?
I was writing things down here, but I didn't write quite fast enough. But have any soil borings been done on the site yet?
There were some that I had to find where they were. They were done years and years ago. I believe some test wells were drilled out there. But there hasn't been any soil borings done recently.
Well, it's not going to, if the land's not developed, they aren't going to change. But I'm assuming, I guess, I guess it would be interesting to know, or I would think if anyone developing the site would want to know that the soil characteristics are at least similar to the ones that are around there, or for projects that are around there. And what I know of it, it is, it's not bad soil. It's just, there is some clay out there, but other than that, I think it's probably fine. I think that's a very drainable site. I mean, from my standpoint, I'm very interested in, keeping energy behind things like this, and moving them at least to some point where we can, see if there's, if there's a viable, I mean, if we can get somebody to, to bite on it. I know that there was when this particular piece of property has been talked about in times past, the fact that it was originally designated for, at least a portion of it for housing, and obviously that would be removed from this. That's not a particular concern of mine because I think there's plenty of developable land, on the south side of the city there that could be developed as housing. Mike I thought was asking about that the square of land that's just east, that's east of it, the property there between it and Highway 61, that's all zoned the same, this mixed use. I realize this is a public meeting, but I'm just curious to know if there's any, if there's any potential for that property being included, as part of, all or part of that is being included in this. And I guess that's because it's owned by, obviously it's owned by private, it's privately owned land. But I would think that would obviously increase the attractiveness of this property if there was a larger width of it that extended out to Highway 61 there. Do you know, Donovan, is that wide enough? Is that little tongue of land that does extend to the east there? I mean, is it wide enough to put a drive or a road or something, a private road in there if that was desired?
No, actually, they're wetlands that really impair that little tongue of land. I mean, it probably would be better off to be, connected to it, one of the adjoining parcels, because it's kind of separate. However, that property, I think it's about a 15-acre parcel that's been for sale there. Development of that parcel is impacted by the fact that you have to run any kind of sewer line directly west to the interceptor, which runs through the middle of this Headwaters 123 parcel. And the city's not willing to, encumber any kind of sewer pipe through the middle of, undeveloped land until we know exactly where, any
Yep,
future
that makes-
development will be located.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's good information to know. I just wonder how important that would be, because, access to this property off of Headwaters is essentially a one-way street. Unless you do that, unless your point of access is at a point where it crosses. And I guess I guess that raises the other question, is that, would the city be open to, that kind of thing, crossing the median there so that there would be, essentially two-way traffic from a major point of access along Headwaters Parkway there to this property. I mean, there's one on the west side of the Y there.
Yeah, so
Maybe that's enough.
yeah, well, see, there's the Headwater, there's the
Okay,
showing
yeah,
the
that's right.
screen.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's your wetland complex, but then there's this crossover that lean directly to the 123 land. So
that would work.
Yeah, so that I think access is pretty good, and this is on a road that could, it's planned to accommodate 15,000 cars per day on average.
So you've got one in the middle there too.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Other comments from commissioners? If you're looking for a head nod from me, Donovan, I'm pretty much on board that if we need to kind of move forward with whatever changes we need to do now with this property, to make it more marketable, I see positive light in it being a data center or some sort of tech center myself. I also realize that could be 6 months down the road, or it could be almost 10 years down the road. And I know it can be very much a long-term play that's very viable, but the sooner we start making actions, the better. I think that, about 4 properties to the east, I think they're private homes. I would be open to making changes to that was in unison with this property, assuming that those property owners were kind of on board with that. I think I'd almost lean in the direction of hearing their opinion really strongly in that. And so I might suggest that you informally poll them and make a decision as to your staff recommendation when we're ultimately going to vote in that direction.
Certainly, I can investigate that one. And, what I would think was that the city's, kind of development horizon is much longer than any kind of private parties. So that we just may not be aligned to have someone who's willing to wait for that big fish to swim upstream, so to speak. But I like that as a suggestion.
Commissioner Young, I saw you raise your hand.
Eric, do you mean the houses on the access road?
Yes.
Yes. The ones Donovan had pointed out, he had suggested, or maybe it wasn't Donovan, somebody had suggested including that in any in any changes. And I'm open to it, Susan, if those property owners, I mean, make a compelling argument to why I'm wrong. I'm not stuck on it.
I don't think that you need that to square that off at all. And you know, knowing a little bit about those houses, somehow I don't see them, most of them, interested in leaving soon.
Commissioner Keen?
I think, Eric, what you were talking about is not making them move or anything, but just maybe dividing up their property more instead of them having, 20 acres each. Maybe they cut it back down to 5 acres and sell the rest off to some big conglomerate. And if it's feasible.
I'm open. I think the conversation, I think it's an easy conversation to have from staff to them, to see if they want to be included in that and consider that as part of the recommendation to us. I'm not stuck either way in it. I'm very open to it. I'm okay with how it's zoned today, and set, and I'm okay if we make changes that it mirrored what the 123 property has. Are there other comments from commissioners? Do you have everything you need from us, Donovan?
Yes, sir.
Dan?
Thank you.
Okay. We will move on to item number 9, zoning map amendment application 123 Headwaters property. The public hearing for this is postponed. Was there something else you wanted to add to this too, Donovan?
No, I mean, really, it was the reason I left on the agenda is that I wanted to clarify that for anyone who received a notification, because I did send out letters to nearby property owners that we would not be having an open public hearing on this, so that they wouldn't expect to have see one at this meeting. And I don't really have any updates other than, we discussed it. It's just, I want to actually get things more in tandem as far as getting the comp plan amendment proposal together, and bring the comp plan amendment as well as the zoning map amendment together in tandem.
Were there any comments from commissioners that were holding off for this part? Susan, your hand's raised.
Donovan, one of the things we talked about before was on the east side of 61, rezoning a significant number of those properties. That's not what you are intending this evening, correct?
Correct.
Other comments on this? Otherwise, we'll move to the added agenda item. Seeing any. So we're moving on to item number 10 that was not listed on the printed agenda item. I know everybody's been passionately waiting for the rooster nuisance memo from Donovan. If you're wondering why this came kind of late, City Council on Monday night had a conversation about it, and Councilmember Gerard could clarify this, but I think they got about halfway through and they were like, we should send this to Planning Commission. They kind of wanted our opinion on it. So Donovan, do you want to explain your memo or what you're looking for from us?
Sure.
You have to do it without laughing.
All right. This is, I will say that Commissioner Chair Langness's description is correct, that this was a request of the City Council on Monday evening to discuss, the keeping of chickens rules and specifically roosters. There is a property that's within the residential zoning district, rural residential, that is basically in a location that, looking at the actual of the coop shown in your screen as that, red rectangle, there's considerable distances to adjacent residences. This property, the owner's property, is 7 acres. Some of these properties are smaller. This is all rural residential zoned land. And it's generated some concern among council on what can be done for the situation. The homeowner reports that she's kind of at something of wit's end around the noise. And looking at the applicable zoning code rules, stating that livestock may be allowed in conservancy, agriculture, and rural residential districts on properties that are greater than 5 acres. Stating explicitly that no livestock shall be placed on any site less than 5 acres. And of course, chicken being classified as livestock. And then there's the exception that except chickens located on single-family properties and residential zoning districts, and then there could be a certificate of compliance obtained, and this is something that the council passed in 2013, and we've processed, I believe, 25 of these in that time since then. And actually, there's been quite a run on chickens lately. I've been doing I've probably done 2 or 3 since the COVID restrictions have been enacted. Seems like people are home and they want new projects, so they're getting chickens. And those conditions also state explicitly that no person shall keep a rooster. So, I mean, these are for all properties within the medium density, low density residential districts, and then for properties within agriculture that are smaller than 5 acres, if there is a single family residence on that. And I actually have taken some inquiries for those where there are some properties that are maybe like 2-3 acres in size, where your backyard is only maybe 200 feet wide, and these livestock requirements require the setback of 100 feet of that chicken coop or farm animal structure, of 100 feet, as well as further setbacks from the house, as well as adjacent well or residence, and seasonal or year-round surface water. And I'll state that those conditions of the setbacks are met here on this property, which was the basis of the complaint, as well as another big piece would be that limiting the number based on 2 ungrazable acres, and this property, the chicken owner also complies with that. So according to the way the rules are written, the rooster owner is meeting the rules, and what I've spoken with to the property owner is that one thing that could be in place would be the nuisance ordinance. And this is part of city code that says that all necessary noises which tend to disturb the peace and repose of neighboring property owners is prohibited. But that's really a subjective judgment. In this case, it would be by a responding police officer. And then to actually have some change, actually had that violation be prosecuted in criminal court, having a judge, of course, agree to that. So that's a far stretch. But that's kind of where we're at as far as the code goes. And this is pretty much what the city council, we looked at, what if the code was changed today? Would that eliminate the roosters? Well, no, because there's rules on non-conforming uses that allow that to continue until more than a year of ceased use, and then it can't be reestablished. And also I noted that approximately 16% of all the city land is zoned rural residential. So any zoning text amendment that might impact, roosters, ignoring the non-conforming use part, really would, impact hundreds of properties. So that is essentially what, city council wanted, the planning commission to consider. And what, based in, sorry, I'm losing my.
Stop while you're ahead.
Yeah, no, sorry, I'm trying to stop screen share so I can bring you all back and turn over to commissioners for discussion.
Oh, Donovan, I was just curious, out of all them homes, which home did that belong to?
It belongs to the, no.
Just curious. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but I was just curious as to which one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to focus too much on the complaint because it's, this could happen in other situations, but that's the house to the south here, the one that's 265 feet, approximate distance from the coop. And
No,
this is
he's talking, he wants to know where's the owner's home?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right.
The owner's here, 150 feet approximately from the coop. And that's just a shed right there.
Oh, okay.
So if he wanted to be nice, he could move the coop somewhere else on his property, further away from all that.
Still gonna.
It's just, I mean, I know the rooster's still gonna make noise and that's what they do.
Yeah, I mean, that, if we could get agreement, that I don't know if that would make a difference. I mean, that's getting the specifics of it. And maybe, maybe there's a solution here that, planning commission could come up with, but it's kind of, if we look in the larger sense of things, with the coop being here, it's kind of right above the address number in the woods, at the edge of the woods. It's essentially, that is essentially the middle of the property, and, moving it elsewhere would, put it closer to another home to the northeast.
Commissioner Young is raising her hand. I was trying to call on her earlier, but didn't realize my mic was on.
Okay. A few years ago, I got ambushed at my mailbox by my neighbor who said, "You're on the city council, Susan. What are you going to do about those coyotes and turkeys?" I said, "Pardon me, Bob?" He said, "Well, I have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and those coyotes go off at midnight or 2 a.m. and they're waking me up in the middle of the night. And my wife has to leave the house at 6 o'clock and she finally gets back to sleep after the coyotes and the turkeys are waking her up at 5:30. And I said, "Bob, you live in a rural area. You moved to a rural area." I had just spent 6 hours dealing with a council member in a city who was upset because she was hearing snow plows at 7 o'clock in the morning clearing the parking lots. If you live in the city, you hear city sounds. If you live in the country, you hear country sounds. I admit that I'm really not thrilled with my neighbor shooting off his AR at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning when I'm thinking about an extra hour of sleep. But I live in the country, and there are country sounds. And if you live in a rural estate or a rurally zoned area that is not a city lot, and we have city lots here in Forest Lake, you can expect to hear rural noises, whether they be coyotes or turkeys or roosters or the occasional cow or a silly being wee that's bawling for her mama. Those are country sounds, and I am not inclined to try and regulate country sounds in country zoning districts.
Are there other comments from commissioners? Otherwise I can as well. Commissioner Batty?
I've just, we've had some fun with this, but I know it's serious business, and so we'll treat it seriously. But I'm, what do? I mean, so the no roosters thing is on properties that are less than 5 acres, right? If you have more than 5 acres, you can have roosters. Is that the way that works, Donovan?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. I'm not willing to give that up, I'll admit to being a farmer boy. I grew up on a farm. I grew up with roosters. And I know they start crowing in the summertime really early in the morning, and but I'm not really willing to change that, because I don't think that's an unreasonable thing. But I know enough about roosters and roosters crowing that that they're going to 250 feet is not, they can be heard, certainly depending on which way the wind is blowing, for more than 250 feet. So I'm not willing to change that. I just am not.
I watched the council meeting, and one thing and your report was pretty comprehensive, Donovan, but one piece I think that you didn't mention was that I think is important to the conversation when we're specifically looking at that property. Our attorney weighed in and basically said, if we changed our rules, it doesn't change that property's use unless they stop doing it for a year. And so we could say no chickens in agricultural zoning, and that property would continue to seemingly annoy its neighbor, and could do so indefinitely as long as they didn't stop doing so for a year. Did I summarize that right, Donovan?
That's correct.
Secondly, I'm not a big fan of change in policy for one issue. Quite frankly, I remember the great chicken debate like 10 years ago when that policy came about, and it was quite the conversation. There was a lot of people involved on both sides, anti and pro chicken. And quite frankly, I was in the middle, just didn't care, eating popcorn on the side. And
there must have been a whole lot of squawking going on there.
There was a lot of noise over it, and I thought, I grew up in the city, so I don't understand raising chickens in your backyard, but I suppose I could do it here. I just don't have interest in it, but I did attend Hools did this chicken class, and somebody in my house wants chickens. I can tell you it's not happening, but we went to this little Hools class at the Legion, and I didn't hear a lot of complaints from what was clearly a whole bunch of chicken owners about local policies here in Forest Lake prohibiting them to levels where they felt their freedoms were destroyed or something along those lines. And I haven't heard a lot of complaints on the other side either, which honestly tells me the policy we have today is probably a good policy. And so I hesitate to change much of anything. I mean, if we were going to change anything, I might say let's look at the distances, but I would want some research or evidence that says here's how far a rooster crow noise travels, and is it actually an annoyance at that point? But Commissioner Young, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I do. So no chickens and no laundry lines, huh? Sorry.
That is correct.
If we're going to do the rooster thing, then we're going to get into a real mell of a hess, because then we have to talk about peacocks. I don't know if any of the other commissioners live anywhere near a peacock. The first time I heard it, I thought that somebody was carrying a cat limb from limb, and this person lives almost a half mile from me. I'm going to go back to it. There are urban noises that one expects, and there are rural noises that one expects, and we really don't have control over what many folks could consider happy or objectionable rural noises. And whether it's a coyote or a peacock or a rooster in a rural zoning district, I don't see a need to change.
Great. Other commissioners? I'm going to call on you, Councilmember Gerard. Do you think we've given the council everything you're looking for on this topic?
I do. Donovan did a good job presenting it at the council. It was clear that even if we were to change something, nothing would happen in this case. It really came down to people and their quality of life. And I have one person who's probably very happy with the roosters, and I have someone who's very unhappy. And the unhappy party did come to city council couple months ago with some audio, and there was quite a bit of squawking by the rooster. And so they had brought it back up, and we felt it was time to discuss it. And I think the bigger picture was like, we all understood that nothing would probably happen here, but we wanted to, one, make sure that we understood that correctly. And from what I gathered from everyone on the commission here, yes, we did. And then generally, do we think we have it right? Am I correct on that, Donovan? Those are kind of the 2 points I took from it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I think the council looks at, the city council looks at the planning commissioners as kind of what I always call like the wise sages of the zoning code. And, maybe some discussion could produce something, some, not maybe a proposed change, but, if there are standards that could be tweaked that could provide some relief to this homeowner. Independently, I did review some of our local, nearby or peer city zoning codes, and I did find that 5 acre size seems to be pretty. It seems to be it's a common number for that kind of cutoff for keeping of livestock. There was one. I think it was Hastings has a provision where roosters on the run can be impounded, and a process where you have to pay to recover your rooster. So that is that is a potential, but then of course that means more enforcement and obviously the city does contract with the animal control officer, and that's possible, but and that, that was one of the complaints of the neighbor, was that the chickens were coming across the property line. But that doesn't really address the central issue, which is the noise.
And to Donovan's point, the current council really looks to the planning commission, because you have the in-depth knowledge of how these different zones work. Many on, I'm one that was on the commission, so I have some pretty good experience. But the other ones, 3 of them at least, have very little, and so they really do rely on the commission to come up with, are we doing it correctly? And that's one of the reasons they wanted to kick this back to you guys, to see if you had a different idea, a different plan, something we should do. And it seems clear from everything I've heard tonight is that everyone is good with the current plan as is.
I think
Yes, sir.
that's correct, Councilmember Gerard. I honestly think the balance is really good. If you want to live around chickens, there's a lot of it's about half the city you can live around chickens, and if you don't want to live around chickens, the other half the city fits that too. So we've got the best of both chicken worlds here. I prefer mine on a plate. Are we done with this one, Donovan? Can we move on to other business?
I believe so. Thank you.
All right. Do you have anything? Do you want to start?
Just announce that we are holding a planning commission meeting on the Wednesday, 27th. Again, it'll be another virtual meeting. And so look forward to that. And there are, we're still looking at some other applications coming in, some that we've been working for a while. So I think that even though we live in something of a restricted social environment or even commercial environment, there are still there's still applications coming forward. And that's really that's it for me for my update. I'd happy to answer any questions of City Council. I'm sorry, Planning Commission.
Are there questions for Donovan? Commissioner Miller?
The only question I have, and I get it asked of me quite a bit, is do we have any plans for road improvements? Repairs, potholes? Mr. Gerard?
I'll take this for Donovan. There is, we passed a bonding bill for about $4 million to add to our roads. A map is out of what roads will be redone, and I can't remember what council meeting that was. Maybe 2 of them ago. I could do a little research for you there, Kevin.
Commissioner Miller, if you email Ryan, he'll actually send you the whole list of the schedule going years out of all the plans. He's provided to me. If it wasn't buried in my email and I could say I could get it to you real quick, I'd forward it to you right now, but.
No problem. I'll find it and I'll pass it on.
And that is the road, pretty much the road reconstruction. And then they are getting ready to open the bids for, or award the bid for this year's seal coating. I believe that comes at the next council meeting, which will be, I think it's a Tuesday after Memorial.
Yeah, the 26th.
26th, I believe that. So there's 2 projects here. One's road, one is just seal coating.
Councilmember Gerard, do you have any updates for us? I will first say I apologize for not having you on our last Zoom call. I realized it at the end of our meeting when I went to call on you, and it was like, no one sent this to our council liaison. So, yeah.
Well, if I would have watched the calendar a little bit closer, I would have been able to get on it too and say, hey, I should get right to this. But no harm, no foul. I watched it. It was exciting video to watch. No, I have no real update. The council, it's been pretty quiet with this whole lockdown and the Zoom meetings. A lot of stuff is not happening, and that's really shrinks up what we cover at the council.
questions for our council liaison? All right, we'll go around the room. Susan, did you want to start?
Mr. Kuhn has something.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Keen.
Hey, Paul, has anything been brought up? I know we're not the enforcers of the planning commission, but is there anything happening with the Winnick property there since they were not going to, with their CUP 2 years ago, we went through everything. They were going to put in new trees and that, and then they wanted to wait till wintertime was over. And he gave us his word he was going to do something with that. And I mean, I get people asking me probably every couple months, like what's going on there? Why didn't they put up a fence or whatever? And I don't know. I don't know the answer.
I have no news to give you on that. I'm hoping Donovan may have a little bit more.
I don't have any update on that.
All right, we'll move on. Commissioner Young, did you want to start off on the going around?
I would just have a motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Glad to second that.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Miller, second motion to adjourn is non-debatable, but Justin Brink's daughters look cute.
She also seconds.
Karen, can we take a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Young,
Aye.
Commissioner Keen,
No.
Commissioner Brink,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye, and Commissioner Keen can stay on all night.
Commissioner Batty,
Aye.
Chair Langness.
Aye. Motion carries. We are adjourned.
Hey, Donovan,
Thank
can
you,
you call
everyone.
me then since this meeting's over? I just had another question. That's all. Thank you.
Donovan, you outdid yourself. I could not have